I'm Gideon St. Helen. I'm an assistant professor in the Clinical Pharmacology Program in the Division of Cardiology at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital as part of UCSF. And my work focuses on the clinical pharmacology of electronic devices, electronic nicotine products, and also cannabis products. I was motivated to pursue a career in science because science allowed me to ask questions, and science provided me with the method to answer these questions in a systematic manner. For example, growing up as a banana farmer's son, I was always really interested in understanding why chemicals and why pesticides were poisonous. Also, why do people say that these chemicals cause cancer, and why did they say these things cause low birth weight in children? I was also really interested in knowing why they said smoking caused cancer, and why was smoking bad for you? What chemicals in cigarette smoke cause cancer? So I was always really interested in these questions. And then I was also interested in would the charcoal that my mom burns when she's cooking, would that also cause cancer? So these questions about the effects of drugs and chemicals on the human body, they are best answered by systematic scientific studies, whether they're conducted in cells, whether they're conducted in animals, or whether they're conducted in humans. So that was really my motivation for getting involved in science and for pursuing a career in science. And I always knew I wanted to focus on health and factors that impacted human health. That's why I majored in biology in college. But I didn't always know which specific health outcome I wanted to focus on. I also didn't know which specific cause of disease that I would focus on. So I learned more about clinical pharmacology and tobacco control when I started my PhD program in toxicology at the University of Georgia. Toxicology and pharmacology students, they took the same courses. Since the basic principles of these two fields are really the same, toxicology focuses broadly on the adverse effects of chemical and physical agents, whereas pharmacology, it entails mainly the study of drugs. So that's how I got exposed to pharmacology through my toxicology courses. The very first project that I worked on the summer that I started my PhD program was focused on measuring exposure to secondhand smoke outside of restaurants and bars. They had just passed this ordinance, they had just banned indoor smoking, and everybody was now smoking outside. So they wanted to know how high was the level of secondhand smoke exposure to people and what chemicals people were exposed to. That's how I got involved in tobacco control research or tobacco-related research. I decided to get a PhD because I wanted to acquire the skills and tools needed to have a career as a researcher at a research university. And I was also thinking, if it's not a research university, it's at a place like the NIH or the CDC. I always wanted to work in one of these places. Mm-hmm. And for me to be able to do research in one of these places, I knew I needed a PhD. And then since secondary school, I always knew that I had to get a terminal degree, whether it was a PhD or whether it was a medical degree. So there was no other consideration for me. My training took a total of 13 years if you include 4 years of undergraduate and then 9 years of PhD studies and postdoctoral training. So after I graduated from college, we took 4 years. I started the PhD program in toxicology at the University of Georgia that very same summer. It took me 5 years to complete my PhD, and it took me 4 years to do this postdoctoral fellowship because I also got 2 years of additional fellowship through funding from a California institute. So in most postdoctoral fellowship take 2 years, but then I got an additional 2 years. So I got 5 years of PhD and then 4 years of postdoctoral training. People finance the training through student loans, through scholarships, through funding from the PhD mentors, through various training grants and fellowships. So for my experience, I received full scholarship all the way from undergrad to graduate school. So I didn't pay anything at all. In graduate school, my PhD studies was really funded through a scholarship from the graduate school and also through funds from my PhD mentor through his NIH grants. However, one of my obstacles was having these feelings of inadequacy or self-doubt, particularly earlier on in my training. And I overcame this obstacle by really putting in the work to study as much as I can, to learn as much as I can. And early success built confidence. So persistence was key to success. Also, telling myself that I belonged really helped me overcome some of these negative feelings. And then another obstacle was the decision to accept a postdoctoral fellowship at UCSF. But the high cost of living made it was really an obstacle for me coming from my financial background. How did I overcome this obstacle? I stayed and I thought of the postdoctoral fellowship and its associated high cost as really an investment in my future. And I thought it really paid off. So I changed my mindset about the high cost of living. I thought 2 years of it is really an investment into a better future. And I think it's really paid off. As I was completing my training as a postdoctoral fellow here at UCSF, a faculty position opened up and I was recruited to stay on. So you could say that I was fortunate or lucky. Most times you don't have an opening, a faculty job opening in the same place that you do in your postdoctoral training. So, for example, most persons in the center that I was at, the Center for Tobacco Control Research and Education, most persons had to look outside to get a job. So most of the fellows had to look outside. One of the most rewarding features of my field is the potential to have a direct impact on federal and state policies. And a significant portion of my research is what is called tobacco regulatory studies, or tobacco regulatory science. And we conduct studies that are designed to inform FDA's regulation of tobacco products. And then the most challenging aspect of my field at UCSF, I'd say, is living off soft money. So, which means that I have to constantly bring in grant funding, and it could be a really stressful way to live. It's quite stressful, I would say. Okay, so 2 things really surprised me about my field. The first is how much we still don't know, even though we know quite a bit about the health impact of smoking. There is still so much we don't know about smoking. And for example, one of the things we don't fully understand is the reasons for significant disparities in smoking cessation and in health endpoints across racial groups in America. And then the second thing that has really surprised me is how quickly the tobacco products keep evolving, whether it's electronic cigarettes, whether it's heated tobacco products that heat the tobacco but it doesn't burn it. So there's always this constantly evolving these new products. And that means there is always a need for new studies, which really keeps us having new grants. The first and most important advice, particularly to those from underrepresented backgrounds, is to see yourself as a scientist, to identify as a scientist, and to believe that you belong. And this is one of the most important predictors of whether people are retained in STEM programs or whether people are successful as scientists. You really have to see yourself as a scientist. A second advice is really to put in the work to learn as much as you can about as much as you can. And then the third advice is to grow a thick skin, to learn to accept criticism, and to not take it personal when somebody criticizes your work, criticizes your paper, criticizes your grant proposal. Most times it's not personal, so you really have to grow a thick skin and learn how to take criticism and use it for your own benefit. And then I'll say a fourth and critical advice is to find mentors and supportive individuals who could be part of your network. It's a really challenging, it's difficult to be successful in science, or especially as a doctoral student, as a young faculty person. It's difficult doing it by yourself. You need really good mentors and you need supportive network. And then the fifth advice is to know what you want to do, but don't be too rigid that you miss opportunities that would take you in a slightly different direction from where you thought you were going.